The Greeks certainly didn't romanticize childhood. I think it's extremely unlikely that any of them would have looked back nostalgically on their childhood in the way so many of us do today. For them, it was merely a stage of life to traverse on the extremely hazardous path to adulthood. I say hazardous because so many of them didn't make it through. In fact, this is going to be a rather somber lecture because there's no way of talking about growing up Greek without acknowledging the fact that a very sizable number of children were either stillborn or died in infancy or early childhood or adolescence, and not to mention the fact that many women died giving birth as well. And that was true, of course, not only of Greece, but also of Egypt, Mesopotamia, Persia, and Rome, and all the later cultures we're going to be talking about, right up through medieval times. Though we don't have any statistics to go on, it's highly unlikely that neonatal mortality was anything lower than 25%. Let's suppose, however, that you survive the trauma of birth. It would now be up to your father to decide whether to raise you. If he didn't like the look of you, if you were misshapen, or if you didn't respond to the appropriate stimuli, the likelihood is that he would expose you. If you happen to be a girl, he might choose to expose you anyway, irrespective of your fitness, since boys were preferred in Greece, as is the case in China to this day. I have a Chinese, wonderful adopted daughter who was exposed. So this particular circumstance has special poignancy for me. One of the reasons why girls were exposed more often than boys was because they had to be provided with a substantial dowry to attract a suitable husband. This meant a considerable drain on a family's resources, especially if there was more than one of them. They were also less productive because they could only perform limited work in the home and in the fields. The lesser value placed on girls is eloquently expressed in Herodotus's comment on the Spartan king Cleomenes, who, I quote, died childless, leaving only one daughter behind. And in a throwaway line by the comic writer called Posidippus, if you have a son, you bring him up, even if you're poor. But if you have a daughter, you abandon her, even if you're rich. I'm sure that brought guffaws from the audience. So if the decision was taken to abandon you, your father would instruct a slave, or possibly the midwife who delivered you, to carry you from the house and abandon you to your fate. Let's hope that you're left at a much frequented spot, or that some compassionate individual sees you and takes pity on you. That's what happened to Oedipus, who was retrieved by a herdsman and handed over to a childless couple. If you were born in Sparta, the state took the decision whether you were fit to rear. You'd be inspected by the elders of the tribes, and if they gave you the thumbs down, you'd be taken to the so-called place of exposure, the apothetai, where birds of prey and wild beasts and the elements would do their work. The elders had, in effect, condemned you to death, and it was illegal for anyone to retrieve you. Different city-states had different laws. In the city of Ephesus, for instance, on the coast of Turkey, exposure was banned except where, and I quote Plutarch, the ankles have become enlarged as a result of famine. While in Thebes, in mainland Greece, it was illegal in all circumstances. Let's now suppose that you've survived birth and been deemed fit to rear. Whew. One of life's hurdles over, but don't think you're out of the woods yet. Your childhood will be beset with hazards from beginning to end. The first few days will be particularly critical, so critical that you won't be given what sociologists call a social persona. That's indicated by the fact that you won't be incorporated into the oikos or oikia, the family or household, for about 5 days after your birth, in case you don't survive. Given the absence of hygiene, the dangers of infection, and the variety of ailments to which you might succumb, it was a pragmatic decision. It perhaps helped to limit the emotional involvement of your parents in you, their newborn, until you had demonstrated the capacity to survive the crisis of birth. Immediately after birth, you'll be wrapped in swaddling bands from head to toe, and these bands will remain on you for about 60 days and be changed only infrequently. Soranus, a Greek physician of the 2nd to 3rd century AD, author of a work called Gynecology, recommended the use of, I quote, soft woolen bands that are clean and not too threadbare, some 3 or 4 fingers in breadth. Well, at least there was a nod here to hygiene in the recommendation that the bands should be clean. On the 5th day after birth, you'll be officially incorporated into the oikos in a ceremony called the amphidromia. Or at least that's what happened at Athens. We don't know what happened elsewhere. The ritual performed at the amphidromia bears a superficial resemblance to a Christian christening or a Jewish Brit. Like many Greek rituals, however, it took place in the home, not in a church or synagogue or temple, and no priest officiated. It takes its name from the fact that the newborn baby was carried around Amphi, the hearth, at a run, drome. The ceremony seems rather comical to us, perhaps. The father circling around a fire at a trot, holding a baby that's no doubt bawling its head off, but I'm sure it would have had deep religious significance for the Athenians. That's because the hearth was the centre, literally and metaphorically, of their home, and Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, was the protectress both of the home and of family life. It was in effect a rite of passage, the first of many that you will undergo on the road to adulthood. Rites of passage provide, among other things, a support mechanism as you pass, often in the company of those in your peer group, from one stage of life to another. The juncture between one stage and another was believed to be particularly fraught with danger, which is why it was necessary to invoke the gods for support. In this case, you're passing from the womb to the outside world. Of course, you're exposed to danger. The amphidromia was both a solemn and a joyful occasion, attended by relatives who would bring gifts for the newborn. They also give you, the newborn, charms to strap around the baby's body so as to protect it against bad luck or demons or the evil eye. The Greeks had no medical explanation for why so many of their newborn children died, so they ascribed them to external factors. Like other ancient peoples, and indeed like peoples living in the Mediterranean today, you as a Greek believed that some individuals could harm a newborn baby just by looking at it with the evil eye. Even today in Greece, people spit when they see a baby, especially if they think it's a beautiful baby, so that if anyone with the evil eye stares at it, they'll be distracted or won't think it's so beautiful. The amphidromia ended with a sacrifice, followed by feasting, like most Greek rituals. Then, on the 10th day after your birth, assuming you survive, you would be given your name. Most firstborn boys were named after their grandfather, as is still customary in Greece today, indicating the importance of continuity in the family line. A coda to all this, so to speak, the Greeks did not practice circumcision. They thought that an uncircumcised penis was more dainty, quote unquote, as the historian Herodotus puts it. Sad to say, there was a very good chance that you would die in the first year of your life. Diarrheal diseases caused by a lack of clean drinking water and the absence of a hygienic human waste disposal system were probably the chief causes of infant mortality, as they are in the developing world today. Add to that the fact that many women became pregnant again very soon after parturition, which depleted their nutritional reserves and reduced both the quantity and the quality of their milk. And for that reason, well-to-do families would usually hire a wet nurse to breastfeed their newborn. Close ties often developed between wet nurses and their charges. In the Odyssey, it's the nurse Eurycleia who first recognizes Odysseus when he returns home to Ithaca in disguise. And in Aeschylus's Oresteia, the most sympathetically drawn character is Caelissa, the nurse of Orestes, who fondly reminisces about the chores she performed on his behalf long ago. A babe in swaddling clothes, she says, can't tell you what the matter is, whether it's hungry or thirsty or wants to go to the potty. Babies can't control themselves. It just comes out and you can't do anything about it. You learn to tell the future in my profession, but heavens above, I was wrong often enough, and then I had to wash its clothing. I was a nurse and a washerwoman rolled into one. Talking about potties, we actually have one